Recollections of Caruso, a special broadcast honoring the man who, 40 years after his death, may still be called the world's most famous tenor. Mr. Francis Robinson, assistant manager of the Metropolitan Opera Association and a foremost authority on the life and career of Enrico Caruso, is our host for this unique program, which is brought to you by Smith Barney and Company, members of the New York Stock Exchange. Mr. Robinson.
We are in the sunroom of Villa Pace, Rosa Ponselle's lovely house, just outside Baltimore. Sunroom couldn't be more appropriate because it's the endless Sunday. The sun is streaming in. The room is done mainly in Miss Ponselle's favorite color, which is purple, and that is the color which becomes a queen. She was our major glory at the Metropolitan for 19 years. Rosa, Caruso was in every sense responsible for your career.
Well, I would say he was, because the moment he heard me, he predicted there and then I would be singing with him. When, he didn't know. And he said, it all depends on what you have up here, pointing to his brain, and what you have down here, pointing to his heart. That depends.
And his prophecy came to
and
pass
his prophecy came
in a
much
remarkably short time.
Remarkable, yes. I said, when? He said, oh, that is in the laps of the gods. Well, this was in April, I believe, wasn't it,
Yes,
Francis?
yes.
And the following November,
1918.
I debuted in 1918, that same year, in Forza del Destino, as
And
Leonora.
how did you first come to his attention?
Well, it's a long story. It's from the vaudeville days with Carmela, you know. We were rooming at
Carmela, your sister?
my sister Carmela, who later sang at the Metropolitan.
Yes.
We were living with a lovely Irish family, and there was also a roomer there who was in vaudeville. And she was married to a tenor, would-be tenor. He never did amount to anything, but he was so ambitious. But he was studying with Mr. Thorne at the time. And he said to us, girls, you should sing for Mr. Thorne. He knows Gatti Gazzazzi, he knows Campanini, he knows all the big wigs in the operatic field. And he was, of course, ambitious for opera in an operatic career. Well, I had no ambition, Francis. I mean, I just sang, was happy singing. I didn't care where I sang as long as I sang. I didn't have any such aspirations. And so Carmela, my sister, said, well, let's go to him. I said, well, you go first, Carmela, because I was very leery of singing teachers. Always intuitively, I was afraid of singing teachers. I stayed clear away from them, and I'd never had any training.
Rudolph Ding once said, there are no good teachers, only good pupils.
There, he has something there as far as the generalities go. So Carmela said, all right, Gatti Gazzazzi knows all the impresarios in the field. Why, I'll let you know. So she went, and she said, yes, I saw so-and-so soon. I saw autographed pictures of Gatti Gazzazzi, of Campanini, Rosa, Caruso, all the bigwigs. So I said, all right, I'll go too. And he didn't even want to take me.
Mr. Thorne.
He said, one singer in the family's enough. He was very much interested in my sister at the time. And I said, well, I'm going to pay for my lessons, and you're going to teach me whether you want or not. So that's the attitude I took. Said, all right. So he took me on. Then he started to take a deeper interest in both of us, and he started to invite Raisa, Didur, De Luca, all the Metropolitan celebrities that he knew quite well, and invited them up to hear me from time to time. And at length came Caruso. This is after, I've been studying 3 or 4 months at the time. And Caruso entered the room, and Carmela and I were all set to audition for Caruso. Raisa, De Luca, Dido, if I recall, were present. And he looked at me the moment he entered the room, and he said, "Hey, Shkunitz, sai che risomiglia a me?" Meaning, what is Shkunitz comparable to in English? Urchin, Neapolitan, being of Neapolitan extraction. And there is a certain similarity in our features. There's a crooked nose like I have, and square bone structure, high cheekbones.
Great, marvelous.
And he looked at me and thought I resembled him very much. I said, and I answered in Neapolitan, "Se potesse cantare come voi, non mi dispiacerebbe. Between Italian, pure Italian, and Neapolitan was quite a mixture. And so he thought that was quite...
Well, now, you'd best translate that.
He said, I forgot to translate. He said, well, if I could sing like you, I wouldn't even mind looking like you. And we hit it off right from that moment on. He said, well, we'll see. And so we proceeded to sing. And I suppose you want to know what we sang?
Yes.
Well, we sang the duet from Aida, the duet from Gioconda, and I sang D'amor sulle rose from Trovatore, and D'Italia amore, Taccia la notte placide from the first act of Trovatore. And I saw his face light up, and they all sat there motionless. The rest had heard me prior to that, but not Caruso, and they wanted to see his reaction. So I was waiting with my heart in my mouth as to what the results would be in reaction. He said, well, he said, I predict you will be singing with me. And of course, there's where it all happened. The rest you know.
And he brought you to Gatta-Casazza.
Brought me to Gatta-Casazza. Oh, immediately Gatta-Casazza called up the very next day. And that's what Thorner wanted, that Gatti should come after us, you see. And Gatti called up and he said, I understand you have two very interesting operatic voices there, two Italian girls, Carmela and Rosa. Ponselle was our real name. I said, yes. He said, oh, I'd like to hear them. And this is exactly what he planned.
And he was planning at that time the first Metropolitan production of La Forza della
Well, I didn't know
Destina.
I didn't know at the time of the first audition. I just went with what
And he
I
had no
happened to
soprano,
know.
and you were an answer to prayer.
That's right. After he heard my debut, when we made our audition, our first audition, he called me in his office. He said, here, read this and take it home if you want and sign it. Well, there was the contract for 3 years, I believe it was, and an option of 2.
Yeah.
To debut in La Forza della Destina with Caruso, November 15th, 1918.
Now tell us what that opening night was like with Caruso. Tell us about that debut. Was he...
Well, that debut, the strangest thing, even up to the general rehearsal on Wednesday morning, I didn't know what nerves were. I was young and ignorant. I didn't know any better. I just vivacious and energetic, and the general rehearsal went off fine on Wednesday morning. And so much so that I even accepted a luncheon engagement that Mr. Neuer gave, who was in charge of the Canabi.
Yes.
At that time, manager of the Canabi piano. He gave a big luncheon for me right after the general rehearsal. That's how brazen I was. Well, that night, a tenor debuted at the Metropolitan. I won't mention his name. And the next morning, he got very unfavorable reviews from the critics. It was unanimous that this third-rate, what have you. Well, when I read those reviews, I said, good God, if they do this to a celebrity, what are they going to do to poor, unknown Rosa? Oh! Then the shivers started, and it never left me. And how I ever got to that performance, or how I ever made up, how I got through it, is only a miracle of God. That's all. I can say just a miracle. And Caruso, of course, would come in, and he was equally as nervous. I understand he was as nervous as a first-night performance every time he had to perform, and especially a premiere.
Yes.
And I sing first, as you know, the opening with
Yes.
the scene with my father, and then the aria. Then he comes in through the window. And as soon as he got to me, puts his arms around me. And it's sto morendo. He said, no, coraggio, io ti sostengo. Between phrases, sto morendo, io ti sostengo. And the two of them doing us alternate phrases, passages were sto morendo, I'll save you, I'm dying, I'll save you, he's saying, and he's dying in his own track. Well, we got through the first act, and I'm sure I was going to die in the second act, because that is, it is one of the most difficult musically and the tessitura-wise ever written for any soprano, no less, and a beginner. That was 55 minutes, I believe, that second act, with the tavern scene was then included, and all the arias, no cuts. Well, I expected to die in the second act when I didn't. So then from there it was easy riding, easy sliding. What is the expression they use here? Easy
Sailing.
Smooth sailing, that's right. Then I could relax. In fact, too much so I had to vocalize over again to wake up for the part in the last act. But that I sang easily. I loved that. That relaxed me. Well, I lived through that, Francis, and from there on in, every time I had a premiere, I'd say to myself, Rosa, you live through that debut, you're going to live through this. And that carried me through every premiere. Isn't that amazing?
That's wonderful. Besides Juive, La Juive, and Forza del Destino, what other parts did you do with Caruso?
That's all.
Those two.
Just those two.
Do you remember the last time you ever saw him or sang with him?
Well, it was one of those Juives.
One of those
Yes,
Juives,
yes.
It was the last opera he...
Yes, and then I would, as I say, I would have done the last performance of Juive with him, but I had a premiere of... What did I do that year? What did the Met do that was new that year? Well, anyway, I had...
Been Oberon?
It could have been. It could have been. And I had the general rehearsal that Wednesday morning, the following morning, so Easton got the last Rochelle with me. I'm glad in a way that I wasn't there when he was stricken. Oh, my...
What is it that you most remember of him?
About him?
What is your strongest recollection of him?
Of him?
Yes.
That great person that he was. Well, of course, the voice, that goes without saying. The voice, the gift, and everything goes. But that great person that he was, that heart that he had, that he wore on his sleeve, on his face. He was a true, warm person.
Generous?
Generous, unselfish, no jealousy. I can't explain. He was just unique, period. With the great artist and the voice that he was, that had no, what do you call, antics. He pulled no antics, no prima donna stuff, no diva stuff. He was so engrossed in his work, and he had no time for such nonsense.
Now, if you had to choose a favorite among his records, what do you think?
Oh,
you'd
that's
take?
difficult. That's so difficult to say. I hear the Rachel, Laria, and the Manon, and the Martha. I don't know. It would be awfully difficult. And I love him in his Neapolitan songs, too.
Why don't we play the aria from La Juive, Rachel?
Oh, dear. I better get my handkerchief out. A lump in my throat.
This is the aria from the last opera that Caruso ever studied and the last that he ever sang. That was the aria Rachel Condu Seigneur from La Juive, recorded by Enrico Caruso at his last recording session less than a year before he died. Our program will continue in a moment.
Caruso was once asked his formula for success. His answer was terse. Work, work, and again work, he replied. And his own career certainly exemplified the results obtainable by that stern rule. In its very different field, the career of Smith Barney and Company presents a similar example. Founded almost 90 years ago during the turmoil of our nation's reconstruction after the Civil War, Smith Barney has since experienced every sort of economic weather. But its work has never ceased. Its efforts on behalf of its clients have never abated. And today it works as unremittingly as ever to provide the sort of investment counsel and assistance that are essential to investment success. The key to such success is, of course, information, definite, detailed, dependable facts and figures, the kind of information that can be obtained only through the most thorough and painstaking research. Staff will go to any length, quite often literally when on-the-spot exploration is necessary, to find out the things Smith Barney's clients need to know. And your investment portfolio might well benefit from the fact that Smith Barney's researchers believe, like Caruso, in work, work, and again work. Now back to Mr. Francis Robinson and the second of tonight's guests.
About the worst thing you can say about a tenor is that he's a second Caruso. However, Giovanni Martinelli is, in a very large sense, as near to the successor of Caruso as we have had. And I'll explain why. Many of the roles which Caruso sang have been sung by no other tenor since his death except by Giovanni Martinelli. That's true of Le Prophète, of La Juive, and up until a few years ago, Samson and Delilah. And next week in Covent Garden, with great honor, they are celebrating the 50th anniversary of the first appearance in London of Giovanni Martinelli. And next season at the Metropolitan, we'll be doing the same thing here, because his first appearance in New York was in 1913. Welcome, Giovanni Martinelli.
Thank you.
Thank you. I heard Bruno Zerato say that other tenors, in speaking of Caruso, always had a but. They would say, Caruso, but. That you never made any exception, that your admiration of him and devotion to him were unqualified.
There were not at all any but, speaking about that great man. He was a really great man, a great person.
When did you first meet him?
The very first time that I met him was in 1912, the fall of 1912 in Teatro del Verme in Milano. I was singing with Claudia Muzio the Manon Lescaut, Puccini, Manon Lescaut, yes. And he came, naturally, he knew very well Claudia Muzio through her father, who was a stage director. And so he was very pleased, and he says, let me say hello to this young man, questo giovane tenore, this young tenor. So he greeted me, he says, I know you've been singing, he says, during the last season, the spring season of the Covent Garden, it was 1912. I know that you had a great success, I'm very pleased. So that will give you the way to go ahead, very, very far ahead, he says. And you are doing very well, this opera that you're doing now, Degree in Manon Lescaut. That was a really, really good little touch of nice encouragement, I would say.
I should say.
Yeah. That was the first time that I met him. Of course, I knew of him. I knew of Caruso. Who didn't? Yeah. And how I knew of Caruso. So this was my very first, very, very touching experience meeting, as I say, again, the great man that I just love him so much and admire so much.
Now, did he hear you do other roles besides?
Well, then he heard me singing here in New York.
Yes. What
time was my debut here in La Bohème. In La Bohème, yes. And of course we start to meet, we start to get together. Sometimes even in little social gathering with friends.
Did you do Pagliacci in his time?
Yes, then I did Pagliacci. Later on I did Pagliacci. And of course, naturally, you cannot avoid to take from a man like this something of that role. You see. And that was my case. One evening I went, because he used to tell me, come to hear me, even at the rehearsal, come to hear me, because, he says, there are a few roles that surely you will take this role, dramatic, because you are going to be a dramatic tenor. I start to be a lyrico spinto, and then we call dramatic tenor. And Pagliacci will be one of your roles. Come to hear me. Of course, one evening I went, you can imagine the admiration that we have this man, what he gives, what the heart and soul that he gives in this role. Couldn't avoid to go after the performance to greet him and timidly say, Signor Caruso, Commendator Caruso, great Caruso, what do you want to say to him? What can I tell you? I said, do you like my Pagliacci video? Oh yes, I said, moltissimo, very, very much. I wish sometime I can do something on the way that you do in such expression, such interpretation of the poor man, Canio. Well, he says, you like this. And do you like my costume? He says, how you ask me that? Why? Well, he says, I'm going to send you my costume. In fact, he gave order immediately to the valet. He says, you take this costume tomorrow to the dry cleaning. Be sure this will be very nice and clean, and send home to Signor Martinelli that he would like to wear it. I said, this is more than an honor. I don't know what to say. No, he says, you take it and you will enjoy it, because I have an idea that this will suit you beautifully. Of course, listen, Francis, thing like this, you don't wear it. You keep it as a treasure.
Yes.
Really a treasure.
Still have it.
Still have it.
Yeah.
But I have my costume designed on that line, on that time.
Yes.
You see. So all my Pagliacci that I was singing during all my career was on the same design pattern of Caruso's costume. That imagine how I treasure. So that to tell you in short what the person he was.
It's like the mantle of Elijah resting on Elisha.
Yeah.
Of all his qualities, which is the one that you remember most strongly?
Very, very joyful man as a quality.
Yes.
Quality.
Tetrazzini said his company was a tonic for all
It was.
ills.
Yes, very easy to say jokes, or set jokes, and what we call just a good friend, friendly form, friendly ways in his expression. He never showed to anybody or his friends that he was the great person beloved by the whole world.
He was modest and
very modest, very modest. But still ring in my mind, still ring in my hearing, my being, I would say, the impression that they receive of the quality of his voice.
Have you heard anything that you thought approached it as a sound?
To approach
To the Caruso voice?
No. No, I must say no. I must say no.
Unique, it was one of a kind.
It was a voice, I think if I can give a good definition, can you say a singing velvet?
That's a very good image.
I can say more than that. Can you imagine it? Caress your velvet and see if you give the voice. That is my impression of the voice of Caruso.
Giovanni, which of his records do you think reveals him most?
Well, of course, I heard many records, and I heard him in person too. Of course, we say we adore the beside the opera, what you call opera arias, but we like of Caruso the famous Neapolitan song.
Oh yes.
There you feel that there's a real atmosphere on Naples.
You almost
feel
see
the
that
warmth.
day and
You feel
the
the warmth. You feel something in the air. That is the quality of the voice he used to do when he used to sing, especially those songs. A Bocchella, for instance.
Yes.
Amarecchiaro, Mamma Mia che vuol sapere.
Why don't we hear Mamma Mia che vuol sapere?
You have Mamma Mia che vuol
Yes,
sapere?
we'll play it now.